going back to this season specifically, what's disappointing to me about what we saw Saturday is Iowa got exposed in a couple of areas that we talked about, probably aren't correctable at this point, specifically the offensive line and some facets of the quarterback situation. So that's concerning. Defensively, again, I thought we saw stubbornness from Phil, not mixing things up. Hopefully they'll get healthy. I mean, they were down Riley Moss. They were down Luke Lachey, their second tight end. They were down Cody Ince on the line. So him coming back will help. Deontay Craig didn't play on the defensive line, who played pretty well against Penn State. Is actually one of the few defensive linemen who had a sack in that game. So, they were down some guys, but that's football. Purdue was down players. They were down there. I believe their top cornerback or two. They were down Xander Horvath, and they had one guy. King Doru was the only scholarship running back playing in the game. So, and yet Iowa didn't attack downfield one time. No, it's a bye week, so it's an opportunity for Iowa to move forward and improve some things. Again, I go back to Ken O'Keefe. He's the guy right now that I'm the most frustrated with, besides maybe just Brian, because he's got one job, and that's developing quarterbacks. And I go back, there's Brandon. Okay, maybe Brandon is a female. I don't know. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I go back to the quarterback situation and what we've seen with Ken O'Keefe, his inability to teach quarterbacks to slide. Spencer has not learned to step forward in the pocket and make a play. When he goes down, like when the pocket collapses, Mark, he becomes, I don't even know I don't want to insult. I'm not mad at Spencer, and Iowa fans shouldn't be mad at Spencer. Like I hear all week long, why don't we play Padilla? Why don't we play Hogan? I fully believe, Mark, that Spencer Petras is the best option Iowa has. And that is not an indictment on Spencer Petras. That's an indictment on this coaching staff. That's just what it is. So, I'm not there at practice every day. But I do believe he's the best they have. I like Spencer. He's got to take it upon himself. I know he worked with that's another thing. He worked with this New Jersey quarterback guru during the offseason. Like, what does that tell you about the coaching at Iowa? I mean, I don't know if I'd be real happy with that if I was Ken O'Keefe, that he's going off in the offseason training with some guy out east. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school and thinking that that's not appropriate or it shouldn't be necessary. Not when you have a full-time quarterbacks coach who's, again, the highest paid QB's coach in the country. So, quarterback and that offensive line is the biggest thing. I'm not worried about the defense. I think they'll be fine. Let's remember that Purdue has exposed Iowa basically every year that Brohm has been there. I believe Brohm is the best game day coach in maybe the Big Ten, certainly in the West. I don't know who you'd put ahead of him. Maybe in the Big Ten. I mean, somebody commented on our show the other day, Ryan Day is the best offensive schemer in the Big Ten. You're an Ohio State guy, Mark. Is Ryan Day the best offensive schematics guy in the Big Ten? I don't think you can say that, not with the level of talent that they have.
It's difficult to judge because of that. There are very few right now that I'm impressed with from that standpoint. So, man, if you go just team by team, program by program, it's difficult to find someone that, they all have their issues. If you're talking about the head coach, if you're talking about Harbaugh and Franklin, no and no. If you're talking about Frost, no. You're talking about, very tangible issues that you see recurring, whether it comes to play calling or development of the quarterback position and the offense in general.
But yeah, I think Brohm is just his ability to attack weaknesses. I'm not saying he's the best coach in the Big Ten. There's people who believe he's on the hot seat. I mean, if they don't end up having a good season, which certainly they're on track for a good season to where he's not going to be losing his job this year. But there were people heading into this year saying that Brohm was on the hot seat. But just from an offensive schematics, game day, play calling standpoint, I think the guy is one of the best in the business.
So when you outline the deficiencies of this offense and that they're not going to improve, they can certainly call a game that's going to protect the offensive line, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands, do all those things that make offensive line play, which is paramount to the offense, of course, but make it less integral. Spencer Petras, when we had many sessions during the offseason discussing his abilities, my projection on him was less about him and more about just the situation and understanding that if he had been tagged as the Iowa starter and they were comfortable with that, and there was basically no quarterback competition, and looking at his progression last year, that I was just playing the probabilities that he would continue to progress and become a better player. I got to say, for a guy that's immobile, that doesn't have a great arm, nothing in the category of Nathan Stanley, that he's also not an accurate passer. It's not a great combination.
Well,
I don't find him as an accurate passer.
He's a sporadically accurate passer. There are times where he puts the money. I think I believe, I disagree with you on one thing there, Mark. I think he's more accurate than Nate Stanley. And I've looked at the numbers. The numbers bear that out strictly from a completion percentage standpoint. If you look back at Nate's career, Spencer's at least a couple percentage marks above that.
Well, I didn't say Stanley was more accurate. I said he had a better arm.
Yeah, I would debate that too. I think Nate Stanley had a big arm. I think Spencer's got a pretty big arm, but I think Spencer is more accurate with his arm. But here's the deal. I'm not debating you on this. Nate Stanley was better than Spencer Petras at Iowa. I made a video a few weeks ago about how, we got to start talking about the fact that Spencer is actually improved, and he is. And I want to address just for a second this comment on the chat here. So this channel last week said that Brian Ferentz was a genius for waiting for a long pass for the touchdown. I actually criticized Brian Ferentz after the Penn State game. I thought he called a very poor game against Penn State. I was very outspoken about that, for the record. Second thing is, I did give him credit, as did Coach Don Patterson. We did give him credit for that play call. It was a very good play call. I'm not sitting here saying that Brian Ferentz doesn't make good play calls. That's not the point of what we're talking about. So just for the record, we did say that last week, but no, he didn't have a great week against Penn State. But Nate had the ability to step forward in the pocket, make plays. He also had the ability, even though he's kind of a statue, just like Spencer is, he had this really nice ability to spin out of the pocket, make throws on the run. Spencer can't do any of those things right now. Spencer somehow gets out of the pocket. It better be on a designed boot or naked. He better figure out a way to be by himself out there, because 9 times out of 10, if he gets out of the pocket, it's going to turn into a throwaway. So that's frustrating. And whether Kirk Ferentz says that the reason he took a knee at halftime was because of risk of injuries or not, if you have confidence in your quarterback to not make, or confidence in your offensive line to not make a huge error, you're going to take a shot there when you're down a touchdown at halftime. So, again, the coaches aren't stupid. As much as I am giving criticism to both Kirk and Brian for this past week, they realize what they've got, and they do not have, probably you would agree with this, Mark, none of us have as much confidence in Spencer Petras as we had with Nate Stanley, regardless of why that is.
It's one of the most basic pass plays in football. You sprint right to give your quarterback separation from the defensive rush, to give your guys time to get into the end zone. And is it a high percentage play? Obviously not. But the percentage play versus what you and Don talked about the other night in regards to what is the worst thing that could happen, it's not even, there's got to be a 50 times more likelihood of completing the pass for the score than giving up a 100-yard score going the other way. When have we ever seen that happen? And and even though it is a Hail Mary, meaning it's a highly improbable play, you mentioned Baker Mayfield, with the athletes and the skill involved, it becomes more and more completable than it used to be. You see it, I don't want to call it routine, but it happens on a fairly regular basis. So you got to give your guys a shot. Again, when the risk is tiny versus the reward, which is high.
I will say, I agree with all of that, Mark. I will say one of my concerns with the wide receivers heading into the year was lack of size. So there's one thing that if you're fighting for a jump ball down there, but do I think that Kirk is dissecting that? I don't really think so. It would have been an opportunity. Maybe you throw a Brody Brecht or someone who's got size in there who hasn't been playing and kind of make Brohm second guess. I mean, Brohm was playing 3 quarterbacks against Iowa. This is just what he does. I said it during the game. This is what Brohm does. He figures out ways to be sneaky and to highlight his skill position players. So yeah, that didn't make a whole lot of sense. We've seen that in past years with Kirk. It's frustrating. I will say if there's one positive that came out of the game on Saturday is that special teams is still very good. I know that Caleb Shudak missed the short kick. I'm not here to make excuses for him. It was a difficult kick because of where he was on the field. Yeah, I believe he was on the right hash, and he was, it was a tight angle. I think most kickers would say they'd rather be kicking from 40 than 20 if you're on the right hash. So, he's missed very few. I think he's missed like 2 kicks all season. So let's not push the panic button on him. And Torrey Taylor was punting into the wind all day. I was surprised. Don mentioned this as well in our conversations that Torrey didn't punt more traditional on Saturday. He was punting rugby style, which a little bit surprising given the conditions, but the kick return game was good. Charlie Jones had a nice, I believe his was a punt return, and Ivory Kelly Martin had a kick return that both of those plays put him down in the red zone, and they came up with 0 points total. So it's just, and I said it during the game. I mentioned this during the post-game show too. As soon as those guys returned it down to the red zone, I said, they're not going to score. You could just tell. And sure enough, they didn't score. And here's the deal, Mark. And then we can maybe move on from Purdue and focus more attention on the week ahead. But what's amazing about the game on Saturday is Iowa actually caught more breaks, I thought, than Purdue did. Like the pylon touchback where you have, I don't know who it was, but Purdue wide receiver who's reaching for the pylon, lets go of the football inches before the goal line, hits the pylon. It's a touchback. It's a turnover. Like Iowa got that play and didn't deserve it. Then you have Spencer Petras, I want to say first or second quarter. Iowa is near the goal line, the opponent's goal line, and Spencer throws terrible pass, nearly picked off by a linebacker, would have been returned. I guarantee it would have been returned for 6. Should have been caught him. He was right in his hands. He drops it. So that's another break. And then let's not forget that Purdue missed like a 31-yard field goal. So Iowa had every opportunity, even into early in the fourth quarter, to figure out a way to do something, and they just never did. And I made the comment during the postgame show, maybe it's time to just kind of flush this and not look at so much tape. Now, Don kind of disagreed with me. He thinks you have to at least look at the tape, which he's the expert. I'm not. But maybe don't look at every play. He talked about that. You need to, if Mason Richmond is missing blocks the same way, 5, 6, 7 times during the game, just watch one of them and then move on as quickly as you can while also taking lessons from this loss.